All right, good afternoon, and thank you for being here. This is Caitlin Coleman. I am still letting people in from the waiting room, but I'm Water Education Colorado's Publications and Digital Resources Managing Editor. We've really been looking forward to bringing you this webinar on soil health and water. We have some amazing speakers this afternoon, and they have busy schedules, so it was hard to get this scheduled. We're excited to make it happen. As you probably know, we'll hear first from Cindy Lair with the Colorado Department of Agriculture. Then we'll get some more local perspectives of soil health practices at work with Lynn Halliday of the Routt County Conservation District, and then Matt Heimrich, a farmer who's joining us from Crowley County. And finally, we'll turn to you for your questions. But first, I'd like to thank the Colorado Water Conservation Board for their support. Thank you. Next, I'll remind you to please remain muted during our presentations. We'll allow some 15 minutes for Q&A at the end of our time together. At that point, we'll invite you to turn your cameras on if you want and unmute yourselves if you want to pose questions, or you can communicate with us using the chat, and feel free to use the chat during presentations as well. The webinar is being recorded, so we'll share the recording after we're done today or tomorrow or later this week. So our topic, as many of you know, for Water Education Colorado, we try to organize a webinar to take each issue of Headwaters magazine off the page and to dive deeper into whatever subject matter we're covering. We actually just shipped out our fall issue of the magazine, so look for that if you are a member or subscriber. But our summer 2022 issue right here focused on farm and ranch sustainable water management. And really a lot of what we covered came back to soil health and regenerative agriculture practices that affect water quality and water quantity. We're going to learn a lot more about that, and I'll let Cindy kick us off with those. So first, I'll introduce Cindy Lair. She manages the Colorado State Conservation Board and support team and other conservation programs for the Colorado Department of Agriculture. She directs the department's implementation of a state soil health program and works closely with partnering agencies and conservation districts to ensure focus on incentivizing innovation and voluntary conservation. She prioritizes work on water quality and quantity, implementing Colorado's greenhouse gas pollution roadmap, and serves on the Natural and Working Lands Task Force for the U.S. Climate Alliance. Cindy is alumna of the Colorado Agricultural Leadership Class of 2014. Welcome, Cindy.
Well, thank you very much, Caitlin. Before I get started, I want to do a special shout out for the Gates Family Foundation, because they were the very first entity to believe in what this program could offer, and they gave us a $125,000 grant, and that has been seed money to leverage with so many resources, and we're all the way up to almost $30 million right now. So big thanks to the Gates Family Foundation for helping us get started in our grant journey to fund this program. So I'm going to get started. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the STAR program. When the Department of Agriculture created wanted to start a soil health program that could be delivered locally, we found this STAR program. STAR stands for Saving Tomorrow's Agricultural Resources, and it came from Illinois Association of Conservation Districts. It's kind of a 1 to 5-star ranking tool, and it can be done on the farmer's own time or in concert with a local conservation district or other grower group. It's a very simple survey that a producer takes, and they find out what kind of farming practices that they are currently using works within the 1 to 5-star rating. And it's very similar to when you rate restaurants and motels and different events from 1 to 5 stars, 5 being the highest. And one star is usually what 80% of the conventional producers are doing, and you can go all the way up to 5 stars, and that's a field in this case that would be implementing all 5 soil health principles. What soil health principles are we talking about? We're talking about minimizing soil disturbance, maximizing crop diversity and rotation, keeping the soil covered at all times, and maintaining a living root year round as much as possible, and even integrating livestock. And so, what do some of these practices look like that we're trying to promote? Well, we're talking about cover crops and having perennial crops when possible, establishing and supporting windbreaks, having compost application, planning grazing. It's not just putting cows out there and letting them go forever, but it is managed grazing, as well as practicing no-till or reduced tillage. So the theory of change that we're talking about is investing in conservation districts or other eligible entities like grower groups that are geared to be delivering these programs locally. It's a practice-based approach, and really we're just having them take 3 years to try out some new practices. We're not expecting perfection all at once. This is an on-ramp to other opportunities, and what I like about it in the arid West is it means soil health equals better water utilization, and I'm going to go into that more. The importance of on-farm economics and producer decision making is critical. If it doesn't pencil out financially, they're not going to do it. And so we're connecting research and practice. And so my part of this is getting more to practice it, but we're partnering very closely with Colorado State University, who has many research fields in concert with this program. We're very closely connected. So we're working on education, communications, outreach, as well as peer-to-peer learning, because farmers really like learning from each other. We have the STAR program and then the STAR Plus program. The STAR is really just a form to fill out, and it's available on our website. We have for 100 free soil health tests for the first 100 producers that sign up for it. And they also get special signage, and they're able to use this really cool logo that's you can see in the lower right-hand corner. The STAR Plus program is identical to the STAR program, only it's a 3-year program, and it's administered through these 16 conservation districts and 3 eligible entities. The conservation districts receive capacity building payments, but also the farmers receive up to $5,000. And they also have the ability to get soil testing, soil moisture probes, technical assistance, and even access to some equipment grants. That was the quick overview of the STAR program. I want to talk more about how soil health appeals or applies to better water quality and better water utilization, and which can equate to better water quantity. So soil aggregation is really where it's at. You can see in this picture to the right, all the soil that's sticking together really well. It's really everything, because it helps improve infiltration and helps with water holding capacity, carbon storage, and even nutrient holding capacity. So in the event that we would be lucky enough to get an 8 to 10 inch rain event, when you have good soil aggregation, like in that picture on the right, those fields can infiltrate most or all of that rain. And so a lot of times what we see in such a large rain event is runoff or ponding in the field. And that's a good indication that that soil is hurting. So a lot of people think that planting cover crops uses available moisture that should be used for crops, but actually when you have good soil aggregation, you have water for the future to grow crops because it's able to infiltrate all that water. So the nutrients stay in the field instead of going downstream, and the soil can stay in place. I want to, because I work for the Department of Agriculture, I'm not a producer. I don't even pretend to tell farmers and ranchers how to farm or ranch. But this program is there to help connect farmers and ranchers to talk to one another. And I've been friends with a wonderful Oklahoma farmer named Jimmy Emmons for several years now, and he's a practitioner and teacher. He's survived wildfire over his farm and ranch, and has survived over a decade of uh, of drought. And so putting carbon into the soil helps to uh, improve water quality and the water holding capacity. Um, the old way of doing farming is really on the left, and the better way is what you see on the right. And what you see on the right is some no-till as well as a cover crop planted into that no-till. You have a double benefit there. And this is being used throughout the Midwest and East, and in the arid West, we've often looked at this and said, oh gosh, I don't know how much we can attain this because our water is so limited. But people like Jimmy Emmons, and I want to say that I've borrowed a lot of quotes and his slides to help illustrate this connection to water quality and water quantity. And this this slide, or this picture on the right of the graph, it is able to show you how cover crops are actually able to increase moisture in the soil, and looking at the depth of the water that's in the soil. Jimmy, I'm referring to the work that he's done on his land, using no-till and cover crops to increase that infiltration, to get that water penetrating into the soil rather than having it run off. And if you look at the green line, you can see the really nice increase over time. He's actually gotten 102% increase in his soil moisture. He's able to have 5.3 inches per acre as opposed to no-till. Neighboring field is only about 1.7 inches per acre that is retained in the soil after a rain. So he talks about there's a misnomer that if something is growing, it's taking in water, that and in the case of a cover crop, it's taking water that could be used for the cash crop. But in many instances, the conventional crop methods are evaporating more than what the cover crop requires to grow. And so again, here's another illustration that Jimmy provides in the no cover provided in the left-hand side, and then the right-hand side there is the cover crop. And this is the profile down to 40 inches, and they're still able to find that after this rainstorm, it's infiltrated, and they have 7.52 inches per acre of water there. And here's a great slide. Looking at this, you wonder what's going on here. Why no standing water on the left, but yet on the right, you look at it and it looks like a reservoir or a pond. And just to explain that a little bit, the one on the right is conventional tillage. It's small grains, no cover crops, and no grazing. And then the one on the right, or I'm sorry, the one on the left is no-till crop rotation. They're employing cover crops, planned grazing that's managed. And this was a 5.3 inch rainfall event. And they calculated the infiltration rate in inches per hour on both fields. And the one on the left was able to infiltrate 6 inches in an hour. And the infiltration rate on the field on the right is 0.6 inches per hour. So when you calculate the number of gallons of water per acre that's stored from this rain event, believe me, this is amazing. On the left, that field is actually able to capture 143, almost 144,000 gallons of water per acre in the soil. And the one on the right is 16,507 gallons of water per acre that they've been able to store. So night and day difference. Soil health and water quality. The runoff from this field, it's sad, but they applied nitrogen and phosphorus a week prior. Where did it go? Into the water. if you look at these two, they took this from those two fields that I just was showing you the picture and the comparison of. The conventional runoff is shown on the left, and the no-till and cover crops is shown on the right. Which one would you rather drink? It's kind of an easy one to say. So what does improved resilience look like? We are always talking about, oh, you know, we have to be more resilient to drought. These are side-by-side fields. Neither of them is irrigated. It's all dry land. It's a tough year. Again, this is Jimmy Emmons' field on the left. He wasn't able to grow a corn crop off of it, but he had plenty of feed to feed cows, and which made him successful on his return on investment. On the right hand side, it's conventionally grown, and that corn is hurting. So this is what resilience looks like on the left. Our STAR program is doing pretty well in its first year, and here's a map of the state to show where we have farmers that are participating in the STAR program. I want to be careful and say that the STAR program is new. We're in our first year, but we have farmers throughout the state that have been doing this, doing cover crops and no-till for decades. So I don't want to make it sound like this is all brand new. It's brand new for the Department of Agriculture. And then I haven't really talked much about the ranching side of it. Lynn Halliday is going to cover more of that, but we do have STAR for ranches as well. Instead of looking at one field, it looks at the ranch holistically. So I didn't want to leave out ranchers, but I have focused in this part of it on more of the cropland side of it. And but the good news is we're able to expand our STAR program. We just were informed that we have the Climate Smart Commodities grant that came through at $25 million. And we're going to be able to expand the program from 124 farmers to and ranchers to 450. So we're excited about that, and that'll be getting started in 2023. I just wanted to thank you, and I'm sorry to run through so many slides so quickly, but I want to make sure my colleagues are able to have plenty of time, and then if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer them at the end. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Cindy. Those infiltration slides are really amazing. So next up, we'll hear from Lynn Halliday. Lynn's lengthy career as an environmental scientist has focused mainly on watershed and land management, for which she has received numerous awards. She has authored a number of publications encompassing water conservation, watershed planning, groundwater management, lake restoration, and carrying capacity. She's currently the Upper Yampa River Watershed Coordinator and the Routt County Conservation District Board President. Welcome, Lynn.
Thanks, Caitlin. Trying just to get this to work. Here we go. Great. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm honored to be here today. That was an awesome presentation by Cindy and a great overview of STAR, but I will say that a lot has gone into the program. I had the opportunity to sit on some of the science and practice committee work and whatever, and it was really impressive. So congratulations. So I'm here today, as Caitlin mentioned, representing the Routt County Conservation District. We're excited to be celebrating our 80th year of soil and water conservation, working with our local landowners and ranchers and ag producers. I also can speak to the shortly to the nexus between soil health and water, but Cindy did an awesome job of that. So that's really a presentation for another time. And I can certainly go into a lot of detail if anybody wants to do that offline sometime. Feel free to reach out. Today, I'll just do a very quick high-level overview of some of the work we've been doing up here in Routt County through the Conservation District. We began actually our own soil health program back in 2019. And with the help of some local funding, we were able to provide free comprehensive soil testing and technical interpretation on a first come, first serve basis. So we've been doing about 10 of those, 10 ranches a year. And a lot of the things that Cindy covered is what our focus is on as well. As you might guess, it's not your grandfather's NPK soil test. This is a very comprehensive analysis, if you will, of the actual health of the micro ecosystem that should be living in the soil. And so it gives a snapshot to the rancher and to us as the district as we develop a data baseline of what's going on in different parts of our county. And so that program was a perfect segue into the STAR program. And we were fortunate to be chosen as one of 4 statewide to do a pre-pilot program. And then we morphed into the STAR Plus program. And we currently have 5 participating ag producers, very different. We're working with them. Currently, as Cindy mentioned, this is a multi-year program. And so you don't see, if you want to see results right away, then you'd be disappointed because it takes quite some time to be able to see the results that we're desiring. And gee, I hope we can show images like Jimmy's successes there that Cindy showed. We're a little bit different up here in Routt County than parts of the rest of the state. We don't grow corn or what have you, but we do have a lot of rangeland pastures and dryland and irrigated hay. So how basically, in a nutshell, I can't go into much detail because I don't have a lot of time, but we work with the rancher. We have them select the fields they want to work in, or as Cindy mentioned, some of them we do ranch wide on a more holistic approach. We look at the history of the field, the soil type, of course. We dig a pit. We take a composite soil sample and we send it off to the lab. Now, what happens when the lab results come back is you can kind of see it's a whole lot of numbers and symbols. And when you give this to your typical ag producer, rancher, basically they kind of freak out. And so I have to give a shout out to our expert soil team, and specifically Caitlin Vo with NRCS, who has unfortunately moved away to Michigan. She came up with a template where we can plug in the numbers that we get from the lab results. And this is basically a layperson's description of what each parameter, what it is, why it's important, how it applies to their overall goals, what are the ranges of values so that when we see their numbers, they can compare it with what's ideal and what's not. And that leads us to, while we're working with them, a score. Again, it's a snapshot, and so it isn't the be-all end-all, but we'll continue to monitor and measure. And then we can come up with, as we work with them towards their goals, with some prescriptions as to some of the in-field, on-farm practices that can help improve their soil health over time. So I'll go through real quickly a couple of examples. We have one ranch in the Hayden area. It's a 575 plus acre ranch, and mainly grows forage and then runs cattle. And we worked with her, the rancher there, to come up with a very tailored, I think there were maybe 18 different seed species. And I'm not a seed expert, but we brought in outside expertise to help with that seed mix for cover crop, and using a no-till drill, which the district would love to purchase. We've been trying to figure out how to do that, but we had this one, in this case, was rented, and that was planted and is coming up this season. So again, we'll continue to monitor that. Another ranch that we worked with was also in kind of the central part of the county, although we have 5 producers that are throughout the county. And this is really kind of unique because they raise chickens. They raise cage-free happy chickens. And they purchased as part of the STAR program, and I can't tell you how appreciative they are. They purchased a hoop house, which houses the chickens in the winter, keeps them nice and warm. And what they've done on a small scale is they've used this chicken manure to come up with a compost. They have their own little biochar program there, and they make a compost that has had amazing results on the soil just in a short period of time. So we're doing this now on a larger scale, and that's going to be interesting to see how that works out. But as Cindy pointed out, some of these processes, such as adding carbon, will really help to increase the water holding capacity. And their ranch was extremely compacted soils. When we dug the pit there, it almost seemed dead. So we're looking forward to some improvements there. And then the third one that I'll just briefly go over is a cow-calf operation in the Flat Tops area. And they wanted to improve their rotational grazing enhancements. And in order to do that, as you can imagine, it's labor intensive. So they purchased some portable fencing that will help them to do that. We're also looking into, we're working with the U.S. Forest Service on a virtual fencing demonstration project. And then another one of our fields actually was chosen as a STAR research field, and we're working in collaboration with CSU Agricultural Water Quality Program, a lot of great folks there. They installed this upper picture is an edge of field water quality monitoring station that they can control somewhat from remotely. And there's a flume there that captures the sample when they decide to take the sample, and it's kind of complicated, work in progress, but I just got some results in today, and we're starting to see, I think, some interesting results. We have another one up by the Stagecoach area. So more information on that, stay tuned. And then they also installed, I think there's 6 low-cost soil moisture probes that they developed in-house at CSU. And we're hoping that we can tweak that. We had some issues with wildlife, elk, wanting to play around with these stations, but we're now starting to fence them off, and it's working a lot better. So again, we're learning as we go here, and we'll be sharing information. They will be through their programs, and we will be through our programs, and anyone else who might be interested. So that's pretty exciting stuff as well. I think Cindy pretty much covered the desired benefits, so ours are pretty much the same. And with regard to water and watershed management, we're looking at systems, we're looking at a holistic approach, and along with other programs that we have in place, looking to improve on a watershed-wide scale. It's also been a huge educational process for a lot of us, and we're hoping to create a good soil health baseline. We're learning a lot about things like legacy phosphorus and what have you. So we're sharing as we go. We're finding that we're getting some pretty enthusiastic interest, although we certainly want more, and we think that that will be an outcome of this program where ranchers and farmers will talk to one another. And then we'll share what's successful and what's not, and hopefully take it from there, learn from there. So in closing, I just want to say thank you. The STAR program has been great for us, and especially the fact that there's some financing. So we're really excited about this new monies coming down the pipeline where we might be able to do even more work. It's really hard, as you know, ranching and farming is hard anyway, but it's really hard to try to implement new things without some financial support. So that's been huge. And thank you to WECO and all the other groups that have been working hard to build this program.
Wow.
Thanks, Lynn. So next up, I'm going to introduce Matt Heimrich. Matt is a farmer in Crowley County, which, you know, we wanted to specifically call out since we always hear about Crowley County as the example or poster child of buy and dry. So his presence there and success as a farmer and someone who I think is, you know, doing smart things to stretch his water supply and use it in, you know, creative ways is significant. Matt also serves on our board, the Water Education Colorado Board of Trustees, and he is on the board of directors for the Southeastern Colorado Water Conservancy District. And Matt, I'm going to pull up your slides,
Okay.
I think. See 'em?
Yeah. All right. All right. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's great to see a amazing cross section of Coloradans that are interested in the topic. I chose the title as practicing soil health principles because, quite frankly, I think that's a pretty good description. I don't know if anybody really becomes a complete expert at this, but certainly we've been kind of working on this since the mid 2000s. 2012, 13, and 14 were especially rough down here after after we had 2002, and we really kind of realized that we needed to do something different. That's just a typical example. I think we're irrigating a triticale crop there, but Caitlin, why don't you go to the next slide? So just to give folks a little background, the Arkansas River Basin is Colorado's largest basin. Unfortunately, it's also not our richest water basin in terms of water supply. It's a high mountain desert, a high desert environment. You can see the Pueblo Reservoir at almost 4,700 feet, John Martin at 39, and I live in the little town of Olney Springs in Crowley, and we're about 4,400. Our annual precipitation is certainly less than 12 inches a year. I've been here since 1987, and I've yet to actually be able to grow a dryland crop in this valley. It's just we just have a lot of evaporation and a lot of hot days. Last year we had 21 days over 100, and I think our record is 02 and 12, where we had 28 days. So, it's not the easiest place to get something started. Why don't we go to the next slide, Caitlin? So I just thought this is a pretty good demonstration of kind of what we do or have done. The slide on the left is a very typical slide from one of our farms, one of my farms. We're just using a dirt ditch with a fabric dam and siphon tubes, and we're essentially flooding the field. On the right-hand side is kind of the technology and the infrastructure that we've been working on diligently for the last several years, replacing those systems with underground pipe and risers and then gated pipe, which is a great water saver, B, much easier to manage, and certainly in our estimation, a very much more effective system. Surface water is always difficult to control, and this just takes some of the headaches out of it. I think we've almost eliminated all of our dirt ditches on the 1,500 acres that we farm, and we're very close to getting almost everything in gated pipe. And we've done that in cooperation, I have to say, with the NRCS, who's been a good partner of ours over here in the Crowley County in the lower valley. Next slide, please. So let's talk about those soil principles real quick. Again, I think it's important that we just recognize that they did come out of the Midwest and certainly the Northern Great Plains. We have a different environment here, but I think we can all agree that those principles have relevance even in our high plains and high desert environment. The first and the biggest one, I think, is you want to armor your soil. And that's simply trying to prevent things from happening like we see on the left-hand side of that screen. That was a 2013 event that actually was photographed by a friend of mine out of Lamar, Colorado, down in Prowers County. Now I'm not saying, when you're going to farm in the Great Plains or the high plains of Colorado and the United States, sometimes these things are inevitable, but certainly we want to try to avoid them. The slide on the right would be an example of what we did on one of our parcels this spring, or late spring, I guess. We knew we were going to be water short. We ended up having a nice 2-day rain event. And all we really did was plant. That is a grain sorghum or milo crop that we simply planted for the reason of putting cover on the ground. I had no expectation, honestly, of harvesting that crop. We're not going to touch that crop until probably late next spring and see what transpires. But I will agree very much with Cindy's observations. I bet I can go out into that field, and as dry as it's been, and we're in moderate drought on the drought scale, I bet I can dig in that ground with a shovel and find moisture. I will completely agree that leaving ground uncovered or not having any residue or a living plant in it is going to dry your soil out much quicker than anything like this that on that slide on the right. The soil just gets too hot. It just evaporates too quickly. Next slide, please. So this is that other one that Cindy talked about, minimize surface soil disturbance. I'd have to say that the slide on the left is kind of what I grew up, that's the wrong way of saying it. I was kind of a 27-year-old when I moved here, and my wife's father-in-law kind of took me under his wing. He was a great farmer and honestly a recognized great conservationist. But honestly, this is how we farmed back in the 80s and 90s. It was almost like clockwork. We would just hook a moldboard plow to one of our tractors. We dual up the other tractors and put a disc harrow and a mulcher on them, and then a land plane, and we'd go to flipping the soil over completely, burying all the residue, and starting out with a clean slate and bedding up and planting into that in the spring. Obviously, in retrospect, not saying it didn't work, but it's proven now that it really destroys soil texture, and quite frankly, it's incredibly time consuming and expensive. I've sat on a lot of tractors in my time, and quite frankly, it gets old. There's no doubt about it. The slide on the right is simply a no-till drill. We actually purchased that particular drill. It has an amazing ability of cutting through an awful lot of residue on the field and precisely planting seed in a great efficient manner. we'll use that in stubble. If we want to try to grow a winter crop like triticale or winter wheat, and we'll also use it later on in the spring to plant oats. Again, we may or may not actually take that crop all the way to fruition, depending on what our water supply looks like. But our thinking here is we want to get a growing viable crop in the ground to keep that soil in great shape. And that tool actually kind of launched us on our journey several years ago. Next slide. There's our friend Lynn talked about an example up there in Routt County where they used a cover crop mixture that had almost 18 different species in it. I've tried that in this country, and I have to tell you, honestly, I've had very little success with it. I'd rather just going to have to rely on what we've been doing and refining, quite frankly, for the last, honestly, since I've moved here back in the 80s. But where Lynn doesn't have the ability to maybe grow a lot of different crops, we have that ability here in the lower valley, as long as we have some water. So we will try to come up with as robust a crop rotation as we possibly can. Our typical rotation is alfalfa, back to corn into some kind of a sorghum, and then into wheat. Sometimes I can add oats or triticale to this. I'd like to try to add some edible beans in the future, but this is a pretty decent rotation that, in our opinion, breaks up those pest cycles, which are both, biological as well as weeds, and allows us to at least for part of that year, or in the case of alfalfa, keep a root and keep the ground covered. The biggest thing that we have to be careful of in this valley, and I would argue most of the high plains, is an event like you saw out there and from that picture that came out of Prowers County. And as well or as good as I think we do, I'm not going to say that I haven't ever had soil blowing off one of my farms. I mean, it happens no matter how good you are. Next slide. So the continual living root, we talked a little bit about that. For us, it's a little tough, simply because of, our water situation and things like that. Our alfalfa kind of works with that, but I think we've also kind of gone in and adapted or tried to figure out how we can bring some more life and vibrancy into our soils. And this is one tool we purchased this winter. The STAR program actually helped with this later on in this year with an equipment grant. They were able to offset some of these costs. So we are a cattle producing area. And if you're somewhat careful about the cattle producers that you deal with, in this case, I'm using manure from small feedlots that we supply hay and grain to. So I kind of know what's coming out of their cows. So I'm not spreading so many noxious weeds around my farm, but we are using manure much more aggressively. This year we put on almost 1,800 tons of manure over 100 acres, and we're going to continue that into the future. I believe honestly that I saw results of that even this year. So we're going to continue working aggressively in that manner. Next slide. One of the last principles of soil management, and this was an easy one for us. Again, You know, we have some of the largest shortgrass prairie in the United States here. We have a big cattle feeding industry. Finding cows to graze your after feed or your farm or what you grow is not an issue. In this case, this is kind of a Midwest example. You can kind of tell from the background, but we've been putting cows on our farms or livestock for that matter ever since Dad moved here in the 1950s. So it's an easy fit for us. They do a great job of converting the biomass residue into manure and urine, which are always good for our ground. In this case, you're seeing an example, I would argue, that maybe is a little not as well managed. We like to put in cross fencing and do a little bit more intensive grazing if we have the wherewithal. That way the cows are moving more frequently and we'll do a better job of cleaning things up. But it's a viable tool that has really been helpful for us. Let's go to the next slide. Just want to quickly again talk about our participation. We are two of the producers from Crowley, myself and my nephew, are in the STAR program. This is an example of the soil tests that they did for us. Again, they can be a little overwhelming. I'm just looking at two real indicators here for my farm. The organic matter as a percentage, 3.1%. That's actually relatively high. I'm pretty proud of that. That's from a farm that we've been working on prior to the STAR program. The one I'm looking at as well that I'm not so happy with is the soil respiration, a parts per million of carbon. I think Lynn did a good job of describing this. This is essentially how much microbial activity is going on in my soil, how that fungi and microbes are actually respirating and releasing CO2. And that score of 39.9 or 40 is really on the lower level. The things that we're trying to do hopefully will result in a higher score eventually than that. Something in the 70s, I think is possible, and that would actually indicate a healthier soil. So we are going to track this, and again, a shout out to Cindy and what she's been able to do. We were kind of on this journey ourselves with not a lot of support, and I just feel better about our whole approach now. Last slide, I think. Just my contact information. Anybody's always welcome to call us, and certainly a big thank you to Caitlin, since I'm PowerPoint impaired at this point. But it's been a great pleasure visiting with you, and I just like to make sure that people know that the Lower Valley, and I think Colorado in general, we've got some unbelievably great farmers and producers and ranchers in this state that are doing a wonderful job of producing food for us and doing it in a way that's sustainable and demonstrating some high levels of stewardship. Thanks a lot, Caitlin.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks to all of our speakers. So it's now time for Q&A. So if anybody has questions, you can either type them into the chat or raise your hand and turn on your camera and ask them yourself.
Oh, those are good ones. We must have answered everybody's questions, Kate.
We have one question so far. Do the presenters have recommendations for further reading?
I do, but just a moment, I'm going to grab it.
let's go to Cindy. I bet she's got a great thing. I've actually just done some Googling, and there's some great stuff out of South Dakota. There's a great soil health coalition up there. I know that.
I just want to point out this great book. It's called The Worst Hard Time. If you've never read about the Dust Bowl and the importance of soil health, this is a great book to start with. It's by author named Timothy Egan. Also want to put a plug for Acres USA. We have Lydia Lazar, the interim director here, and they put out a lot of books and primers and videos and things like that. They do conferences all on regenerative agriculture. We partner with them on the STAR program to produce primers for us to help educate farmers and ranchers that are working with us on this. So I want to do a special shout out for Acres USA. It's a wonderful organization.
Caitlin, if you permit me, I could maybe follow up quickly with a couple of questions from GS and JW. How are you weaning off of chemical fertilizers? I would say that based on the soil test that you saw, and what we're hoping is that a healthier soil will mineralize nutrients more efficiently and make them more available to our plants. What we are hoping is that we will be able to maybe not completely wean ourselves off of supplemental fertilizers, but we are certainly going to reduce the amount of nitrogen-based fertilizers that we're using and our nitrates, and we will probably we will be much more stingier than with those going into the future. And we've actually already started to do that. We have developed different ways of applying our liquid fertilizers, and we're going to follow up with that. The other question is a good one from Jim Walker. I do use subsoiling it on my farm, and even though it is not and is somewhat, I'm not going to say it's not very disruptive, because it certainly is. It's not as bad as moldboard plowing, but a deep subsoiling to start a program off, so your roots and plants have an ability to go down and find deep moisture, is certainly something that I'm not afraid of. And I'll turn it over to anybody else who wants to answer one of those questions.
Could I answer two?
Yep, go for it.
Jeanette Hillary asked if all farmers use NCRD. I think you might mean NRCS or a conservation district. And I wanted to say that not all farmers are using Farm Bill programs. Many farmers and ranchers are doing this all on their own. They talk with one another, and some of those that are on the leading edge of things, they talk to each other and really learn from one another, and maybe aren't using NRCS. But there are a wide array of resources for all producers wherever they are on their journey. There's another question about how people are weaning off of chemical inputs and things like that. That may be something that Matt wants to answer, but it's interesting how you have people, producers that are using more of the soil biology, they're using more companion crops, and through the different types of cover crops, they can actually choose types of plants in that cover crop mix that are biofumigants, and through the use of using the right mix that has different constituents to it that help to replace different types of things like nematicides, insecticides, and things like that. It's amazing how you can reduce your dependence on those different types of inputs, and looking at the ecosystem of your cropland is where a lot of people are moving towards. It doesn't happen overnight, though. It's just kind of reducing those things one by one as you can. And it really boosts over time net profitability because those inputs aren't cheap. So I don't know if you have an answer to that, Matt, as far as your chemical inputs and
You know,
cutting back.
all I would say is that on the fertility, I think you're spot on. Weed pressure is always going to be an issue in a no-till system. And I don't think we would be disingenuous if we didn't say that that the right timing and the proper use and reading labels on selective herbicides is not something that we don't use. I mean, they have a role in production agriculture, and the formulations and the amount of residual effects are being more refined. But I think we have to recognize that that they're going to be part of the equation. I do see that there's a question from Raquel, and I think you need to answer that, Cindy.
Yes, thank you. So Raquel, you're asking, in one of the charts I showed, the soil moisture starts lower in the cover crop and seeing a higher moisture gain through time compared to the no cover crop. And you asked if that's correct. And yes, that is correct. Thinking about using cover crops, it does use more water. But over time, the benefits of that cover crop, a lot of times you don't see it immediately, but in that graph, in that scenario, it did show more of an immediate result. But it uses more water, yes, but it provides the shading, it provides the longer term continuous root. It also helps below the soil in bringing carbon down in the soil, and reducing the soil temperatures. So, and also trapping moisture and getting it into the soil through infiltration. So a lot of those different things that are achieved by having cover crops and ending up with a higher soil moisture in the end.
Good answer.
Quick answer.
I think there's one other question we skipped over, unless I missed that you answered this, but I think it is the STAR program incorporating carbon offsets for landowners based on the carbon storage gains?
So that's a good question. And Matt touched on this. He was proud of his 3 or 3.5% organic matter. Our soils in Colorado are never going to get a real high carbon component. And so being able to, and also carbon cycles fluctuate up and down. And so we don't have the ability to say this is permanent carbon capture. However, the ecosystem services benefits that are happening biologically, as well as that farmers can capitalize on with water quality credits and different things like that are out there from the market side. There will be benefits that way too, even if they're not official carbon offsets. However, there are groups out there that are paying for carbon offsets, even though they're not permanent. So hope that makes sense.
Yeah, that's accurate. Yeah. Wow,
Great.
that was a
We're
rock.
out of time, but does anybody want to add any kind of final thoughts, our speakers or anyone else on the line, if you have anything else to say before we wrap up?
I'll just share this. I mean, I don't want anybody have a misimpression, understanding or impression of what we're doing. I mean, I'm not an evangelist or anything like that. We are really just trying to figure out how to do what we like to do and do it in a way that can provide us with a living, and we can provide for our families and maybe leave something for our kids and grandkids, or in my case, nephews and nieces. But again, I think there's some amazing things going on in agriculture, and farmers and ranchers can be part of the solution. We shouldn't, we sometimes I think we're looked at as the problem, but honestly, I do not believe that.
I totally agree, Matt.
Thanks. That was fun. Let's do it again.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks to our wonderful speakers. Thanks especially to Cindy, who kind of helped think through what we were doing here today. And thanks everyone for being here. I will follow up with a link to the recording and other resources that we talked about today. Anything else that anyone wants to share? So thank you all and have a great afternoon.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.